Welcome to MezFi Meets, a podcast that brings you conversations from the cutting edge of blockchain, AI, financial services, and property, with interesting people doing amazing things. MezFi is an investment manager in Australia, and if you'd like to find out more about us and our products, go to www.mezfi.com. In episode number 9, we're privileged to have Chloe White with us, who helped advise on the creation of the UAE's VARA regulations, the world's first dedicated virtual asset regulator. If you enjoy our content, please consider hitting the like button and subscribing to our channel. Let's jump into today's episode. Hey everyone, it's MezFi Meets with Chloe White. How are you doing, Chloe?
I'm doing great. Good to see you.
You too. Now, Chloe, you and I met, I think it was either in Sydney or earlier this year at the Japan FinTech Festival. And it was a great week, a lot of really interesting conversations to be had. It was at that time that I found out that you'd moved to Dubai. I sort of discovered about your work with the VARA regulations, and overall just a really interesting person in the crypto space. So why don't you just speak a bit as an introduction, how you got into the Web3 space, a bit about your work in the space, and how you found yourself in Dubai 2 years ago now.
Yes, I have a TradFi policy background. I spent a long career in the Australian federal government, and the agency that I spent most of my time was the Commonwealth Treasury. I really loved my experience there working with macroeconomists and then moving into this really interesting team that covered macro financial linkages, looking at the impact of the macroeconomy on financial markets and vice versa. Um, and at the time that I was in that team in 2017, Bitcoin had its incredible rally. And so we started having some quite interesting conversations and debates on the floor. I thought it was super fascinating. And then at the start of 2018, the Treasury asked me if I wanted to lead a policy review on behalf of the portfolio into the initial coin offerings big boom that had happened in that cycle.
Yeah, wow.
And that kind of launched me into thinking through some really interesting policy questions about what can regulation look like for this nascent industry? What should it look like on the basis of certain principles that we might debate across different stakeholders in the industry? And I was completely fascinated by all the weird and wonderful characters that I met, the innovation that was happening in the startup world. And so I just kept working on it. And here I am now in 2024, still in the industry and still thinking about these issues. But since then, I've had the fortune to be able to implement some policy ideas and help drive forward some of the regulatory innovation that's occurred in Dubai, as you alluded to. I was contacted by someone more than a couple of years ago now, who said, "Hey, the Dubai government is looking for someone who can help them design a policy framework. Would you be interested?" And that kickstarted a conversation that took place over a few months. I flew to
Wow.
Dubai and met with the minister and the board who wanted to operationalize this baby regulator. And I was really impressed with their ambition, with the amount of stakeholder consultation they had done. I realized how serious they were. And I thought, what a great opportunity to try and implement
Seriously.
rapidly some of these ideas that I've been working on for a number of years. And so I decided to take the plunge. They relocated me over there and they got me launched right in. And then at the start of last year, the regulatory regime launched. There's a comprehensive set of licenses now available that have been awarded, and a lot of companies in the pipeline continuing to apply and seek licensing. And one of the interesting things about the UAE is that there are actually multiple regulators across Emirates competing with each other
Is
to
that right?
continue policy innovation. Absolutely.
Wow.
So we've seen that there's been a lot that's happened in the last couple of years. There's even the possibility to set up as a native DAO in the UAE now, which means that you don't need to have that traditional LLC wrapper. So as you can tell, I'm
Wow.
quite excited about a lot of the policy innovation that's occurred in the UAE, and it's been really exciting to play a role in it.
That's unbelievable. I mean, I hope you don't mind, but me quoting an AFR article about you earlier this year. It called you. I think it was the go-to advisor for Middle East crypto companies, and I mean, clearly you've had such a hand in you know, the way that obviously you didn't, sort of, you weren't the spearhead for Dubai doing these things, but you've helped them guide them in this way. Um, One thing that I wanted to understand, because when I speak to a few different people, and it's so exciting that Dubai is the first country, or the first, the UAE is the first country in the world to have regulations for these products. Some people that I talk to, they say it's a double-edged sword, and I'd like to get your sort of feedback on this, because they say, oh, it's great that you have regulations now, but because of AML and KYC and all of these, onerous so-called regulations, it means that startups find it hard to get a foothold in Dubai. Is that your experience with it, or do you think that it's actually not the case, and it's actually quite friendly to be a startup in say the Dubai jurisdiction?
It's a great question. I'd add a couple of points of nuance to that.
Sure,
First, a lot of the AML KYC regulations that you mentioned, they are driven at an international level. There's a
sure,
body called FATF that drives a lot of the standards and policies around how those rules work, and then countries essentially import that policy and impose
okay,
the regulation. So it's a very top-down process. The US plays a really leading role in driving a lot of that. So the rules that the UAE has implemented, they are driven at the level of either an emirate or a free zone, depending on the case. It's a little bit of a, I guess, decentralized um, regulatory economy in that sense, which, as I mentioned,
yep,
is really great for business because of all the competition that it generates.
for
Um,
sure,
those the comprehensive set of licenses that were launched at the start of last year, as you said, Jerome, they allow companies to launch a very wide range of products and services across different business models with different
sure,
structures that are actually crypto native. They're not TradFi regulations that you're just trying to impose on a new industry. They're designed to be crypto first, and so
yep,
that is a national um, or regional level initiative, as opposed to the AML KYC rules, which are international.
sure, I
I have
understand.
I've not heard anybody say that they had trouble adapting to AML KYC. However, there are challenges to coming to the UAE. There are absolutely challenges, and I do think that because the UAE has, and Dubai in particular, has developed a reputation for being so crypto friendly. I think some people in the industry may have misinterpreted that to mean that everything's very easy there. And
Okay, yeah,
unfortunately, that's not the case. So, entering into any new market is going to come with its challenges. You have different business culture, different infrastructure, different ways of doing things. And so, of course, it's going to be a learning curve, and there's a journey that you have to follow. And especially depending on where you're coming from, if you're coming from somewhere that has a very different approach, then you're going to have more to learn because it's a different style of doing things that you haven't encountered before. So, some of the challenges that you face are finding people that you can trust, who can guide you on the journey, and also just, I suppose, having the financial resources to be able to enter the market effectively.
yeah,
There is so much opportunity, and it's such a fast growing market, but you still need to have probably bootstrapped or raised some capital to be able to afford the application fees and other
yeah.
expenses that you're going to need to go to market. So you really need to have a good business plan and a proper strategy for go to market to have success, because it is becoming um, more of a sophisticated market, and with that greater opportunity also comes responsibility. And so the regulators there are very proud. They want to make sure that the entities they license are not going to embarrass them or cause them
Yep.
regret. So you do need to maintain high standards if you're going to be seeking and attempting to maintain one of these licenses. And that really is not something that I would say is something that should be taken lightly or considered to be a walk in the park.
No, definitely not. And I mean, it sounds to me from what you're saying that it's much harder to set up a rug pool in Dubai than it is in any other jurisdiction because of those more onerous licensing rules. So, if you're in the Seychelles, or if you're in any other. I mean, you can do it in any other country, obviously, that doesn't have a licensing regime yet for crypto. You can set something up, and if it's not necessarily a financial product, you can just do whatever you want really with impunity. Obviously, that's not 100% the case, but it's definitely. I mean, it's a step in the right direction. That's for sure. So I'm really interested then. What about the VARA regulations, and what was it? What did you bring to your advisory of on the VARA regulations? Were there other sort of discussion papers out there from other potential regulators that you sort of brought into what you were doing, or where were a lot of the ideas brought in from for it?
A couple of big decisions that we had to make early on. For example, we've had this debate raging in virtual asset policy for so many years about utility versus security tokens.
Yes.
And so, we sort of had conversations about, do we try to classify tokens? Do we go down the path of what the EU did in their initial consultations with MICA, where they had over 24 different categories of tokens.
Gosh, yeah.
Whereas you have some regimes, like some in Asia, for example, or in the UK, where there's only a few categories.
Yep.
So, do you attempt to define something that's still evolving all the time, and then invite the industry to essentially attempt regulatory arbitrage by then designing something that's slightly tweaked
Slightly
outside of the
different, yeah.
definition, and so all those sorts of things. So one critical decision that we had to make was to completely do away with the notion of utility versus security, and just say a token is a token is a token. And it doesn't matter if
Interesting.
in some other jurisdiction we would say, oh, this would be captured by the Howey test or by, the Corporations Act, Chapter 7 or whatever. We would just say if it runs on a blockchain, it's the dominion of the regulator. And,
Wow,
and the
okay.
regulator is going to take everything into account, and then the regulator will have discretion to make certain carve-outs or special rules, for and on an entity by entity basis, which is the regulator's right. But to try to be as transparent and upfront as possible in how the regulations and rule books are written about what the expectations will be
Mhm.
if you are a regulated entity. So there are sets of rules that apply across every single licensed business in the regime. But then there are specific rule books that are on an activity basis, and then you will just comply with the rules there, depending on the kind of business that you're running, and
Okay.
and then it gets into a lot more detail about what are the risks, who bears the risks, how can you manage and mitigate them, what kind of reporting and transparency do you have to do. So a lot of the rules and regulations were inspired by TradFi regimes in other markets around the world, such as the US um, and the EU, but they are certainly very principles based and written from the point of view of we don't want to get we don't want to drown in debates about, well, but it's a utility because it does this and this. It's like, no, if there's a
Yep.
risk to a consumer or an investor, the risk gets mitigated through rules. End of story. So
Mm.
it's a sort of I guess in a way not technology neutral um by design. And so
Yeah.
it's quite a bold experiment in that respect.
Well, that's interesting because traditional financial services rules, and correct me if I'm wrong, regulations are exactly that. They're technology neutral and designed to capture, securities in whatever form they are, whether it's a piece of paper, whether it's on a blockchain, or whether it's, whatever. If someone is selling something with the promise of a profit, financial services rules are designed to capture them. Whereas this is totally different from that, which is, yeah, I mean, it's is it still the only regulator of its kind in the world? Has anyone followed suit as yet?
Could I just argue against something that you said there, Jerome?
Yeah, sure. Sorry.
I think a lot of these regimes would like to think that they're technology neutral, and
Okay,
maybe
that's
they are
totally
theory,
fair. Yeah.
but certainly not in practice. Um,
Okay.
it's been quite discouraging. For example, looking at some of the guidelines and um, policies coming out of the ATO in Australia that are
Yep.
certainly not technology neutral at all.
No,
Although the
I will
Australian
agree.
version intended to be technology neutral. But so we need to look at the theory versus the reality. And the way that the technology neutrality principle has been interpreted in the case of the Virtual Assets Regulatory Authority, VARA, the regulator that we're talking about in Dubai, is more at the level of the protocol. It's about protocol neutrality. So it's about saying,
Okay.
for example, we're not going to discriminate against certain consensus algorithms, but we will ask you to conduct due diligence and explain what your due diligence is and report that to your customers. So it's just about making sure that where consumers want to engage with risk, that they have informed consent. It's not the regulator's job to select the risk appetite of investors in the market. The regulator's job is to help eliminate information asymmetry so that those decisions can be made with more information and therefore more confidence. And that confidence should underpin the market and its growth. Um, so that's kind of the thinking, I guess, behind the it's tech neutral but not tech neutral. It's a different interpretation of tech neutrality that tries to be, I guess, more bespoke to the needs of the emerging industry. But you had another question before I cut you off.
Oh, I've forgotten because I was very no, I was taken because no, it's true. I realized as soon as you started saying that what I was saying was effectively the intention or at least the ideal, I guess is the right word for of financial services regulators. But no, in I agree with you. In practice, there is no neutrality, and most, if not all, major financial services regulators in the world are biased against crypto. I mean, we have to take some positivity from the recent, what shall we say, the recent um, rumblings out of America. What's happened with Trump coming out in support. They passed the SEC passed. I'm not sure exactly what the name of the paper that they passed was, and then Congress on both sides tried to repeal it, and then Biden came out and vetoed it. I mean, there's definitely a shift in the mood towards crypto in the US and therefore worldwide right now. Do you see that as a potentially positive thing for crypto on the world stage?
Absolutely. I think the discourse in the US at the moment is the most positive that we've seen possibly ever for this industry. The US has been a continual disappointment, not able to
Agreed.
demonstrate any leadership in this space. And so it's certainly very encouraging to see that the US is starting to have a more nuanced conversation. People putting forward reasonable ideas. It's not perfect and it's not complete, but it's a very welcome tone change. So I'm going to continue to watch that space. From all reports, I'm not there at the moment, but the vibe at Consensus in the past week seemed like it was quite positive, certainly better than it was last year. So I'm monitoring all of that from afar, and I do think that if the US can demonstrate some genuine leadership on policy in this space, it could really cement the future of the industry because so much of the world still does look to the US. And the US has always done quite well at tech innovation. And there's so much potential for the US to make a meaningful contribution. So I think it's very exciting.
Yeah, no, I totally agree with you. I totally agree with you. A couple of things. So the first question that comes to mind from what you were saying before is that there's the ability for DAOs to set up natively in Dubai. And the first thing I thought about when you said that was the judgment that was made, I think it was last year or the year before in America, obviously in absentia from all of the DAO members. But the DAO structure was found to be akin to a partnership where DAO members were jointly and severally liable for the decisions that the DAO made, and therefore, they didn't have a corporate veil. They didn't have any ability to hide behind that, and they were seen to be liable. So. I'm keen and interested to know how the DAO structure works in Dubai. So, like, how does the how is it set up there?
So there are multiple regulators that offer um, licensing and incorporation for virtual asset businesses in the UAE. Um, the regulator that has done the most work on this, I would argue, is the regulator in Abu Dhabi. And to
Okay.
give a little bit of extra context, so VARA is quite unique, and you asked me before whether anyone has tried to copy them. So I'm not aware of any initiative globally where a country or a market has actually created a completely new regulatory agency for the purposes of Web3. Certainly, there have been policies implemented around the world, many
Yep.
examples of that. But to have a dedicated Web3 regulator, I've not heard of any other attempts at that outside of Dubai. In the UAE, there are other um, markets, as I mentioned, because it is a like a federation of states in a sense.
Yep.
There are a couple of TradFi regulators that have also licensed virtual asset activity and created policies for virtual assets. Abu Dhabi has a TradFi regulator that has taken responsibility for regulating virtual assets in the Emirate of Abu Dhabi.
Okay.
And one of the things that they have done in this space was last year they launched a DAO and foundations licensing and incorporation system.
Wow.
And so the thing that I think is really cool about that is it means that, say, the founders got hit by a bus or disappeared, um, the DAO, the entity, would have longevity irrespective of the founders. The token holders have the ultimate authority and power, and they can use their tokens, their governance power, to hold the founders accountable or to impact the leadership of the DAO and the foundation. So the power being with the token holders and the entity having some legal personality that is not dependent on the founders is a very cool way to, I guess, give that power and legal backing to the token holders of the DAO. So I was really excited when it launched. They've incorporated some DAOs since it was launched. I've been speaking with a couple of my clients about it who are really interested in it as an opportunity to remain decentralized or try to create a DAO for their community, but in a way that is still licensed and supervised and regulated enough that it also gives confidence to their cap table. And a lot of investors, depending on the jurisdiction that they're from, they do want to invest in a company that isn't run out of the Seychelles or Panama. They do prefer
Yeah.
to know that there's actually a regulator that is supervising you, that you do have obligations and audits that do have to be made transparent, things of that nature. So, what the UAE is offering that I think a lot of startups are quite interested in is they get to have the best of both worlds. They get to run these crypto native business models and structures and products, but also say, yes, we're licensed and we're regulated and there's an authority supervising us. And so they can meet the needs of the investors and the consumers, as well as operating according to the ethos that they want.
Yeah, I mean that's it's definitely a game changer. There's no two ways about that, and I totally understand why. Having lived in Sydney last year for 6 months, I love Sydney. I've also been to Dubai before, and I totally understand why. Having gone over there now, you fall in love with the place and stayed as what you said to me when we met. So I totally get it and notwithstanding the business opportunities and everything else. So what's the mood like over there at the moment? I know Token just was happened about a month ago. What's the vibe over in Dubai at the moment in terms of crypto, in terms of blockchain, businesses? Is it great or what's happening right now?
I would say it's really gathered momentum. I've been really impressed by the level of sophistication of the entities that have come into the market and that are sort of coming through, getting to know the place and starting to figure out what their go-to-market strategies are going to be. It's not just startups who are coming through. It is, right through to kind of TradFi institutions. So I think that momentum has sustained and been quite strong. Um, I was telling people during the bear market that I felt quite inoculated from all of the FUD and the negativity because in Dubai we didn't really have a sense that there was any bear market. There's just been so much continuous building and
Wow.
and things moving forward and all of the encouragement that the industry has received from senior government decision makers as well, and the very in-depth amount of consultation, genuine consultation, not just box ticking that's been done by government authorities. So I do think as well that a lot of people have been attracted into the golf because of the prospects of raising capital. And that's been quite a big draw card for people, especially
Yeah.
throughout the bear market when it was quite difficult to raise. So now we're in a bull. Things are quite healthy in the market at the moment. I think the kind of the rhetorical reflection that I'm hearing from people is people don't feel like it's overly frothy. We certainly see, a lot of action in like meme coins and things happening where we can say, okay, we've reached a point in the market where it's definitely energized, but it doesn't
Yeah.
feel, too toppy or anything like that. We've been
No.
cruising along at altitude since the Bitcoin ETFs were launched. And now we have Ethereum ETF approval, and so and this change in tone in the US political debate as well. So we're cruising at altitude. I think that what you see in Dubai is that people are building on the energy and momentum that already existed throughout the bear, and it's just getting more sophisticated and more serious. So um, I I personally feed off the energy of the market in Dubai, and I feel like it's the right place to be at the right time. And yeah, it's been a really fantastic place to be positioned as we've moved through the market cycle.
Yeah, it sounds like it. I mean, I'm a bit jealous, I'll be honest. I'd love to, I'm thinking, as MezFi launches, I think I mentioned to you that, I'd love to move into other jurisdictions if we do well. Dubai is definitely at the top of the list because of the proximity to Europe and as well as the VARA regulations and everything. Um, yeah, I mean, what about stablecoins? How is the regulator approaching stablecoins? Is there a particular way or a particular view that they've taken? Is it reserve backed only, algorithmic? How does it work?
Yeah, sure. I can give you a quick rundown of the VARA approach to stablecoins. So the stablecoins do have to be fully backed. Um, if there is an increase in issuance, there has to be at least a one-to-one increase in reserves. The reserves have to be of good quality. There is no license for an algorithmic stablecoin, so we're talking about a quite, I guess, traditional, more conservative stablecoin design um, approach here, where essentially you uh, you can't claim or market that you have a stablecoin unless you are licensed by the regulator and comply with those rules. So it's not too dissimilar to how stablecoins are regulated in the EU's MiCA regime. But the EU is currently going through a very detailed process to design rules and regulations around liquidity of backing collateral, whereas in
Interesting.
the VARA regime, it is a bit more principles based, and it does say that you have to make sure that you're not going to move the markets or have some negative impact on markets when you are liquidating your reserve assets as you're trying to match reserves to issuance. So
Mhm.
there's a bit more of a kind of a principles based approach. The EU does tend to be quite prescriptive and detailed with how it writes regulations because it's not a common law system. In the UAE, you have a mix of common and civil law systems, so it can depend, but in general, they do also like to be prescriptive in certain areas and go into detail, but as it stands at the moment, stablecoins are outlined in the issuance rulebook, which is a really, it's I think probably my favorite rulebook, and it's the one that says how you should undergo your due diligence when you're issuing a token in the market, and how you report that to the public. So anybody who's interested in launching stablecoins under VARA, that's the rulebook that you should be referring to.
So are there rule books then for all of the different potential crypto and Web3 businesses or business types that you can start when it comes to VARA?
Exactly. So you could apply to be an asset manager, you could apply to be an advisor, you could be a broker dealer. Payments, there's like a whole range of different licenses that you can seek depending on the services that you want to offer. Custody is another one. Exchange, obviously. So
Yep.
yeah, exactly. There are different rule books, and the rule book that you follow will depend on what activity you're licensed for.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. I mean, they don't really have rule books in other jurisdictions for anything, so that makes things even easier. That's great. Um, Okay, well, look, through all of this work that you've done with VARA, I think we mentioned before, that you've become well renowned for your work in advisory now. Um, are there any businesses that you work for as a result of the work that you've done with VARA that you can sort of share a bit of the work that you've done, or is it mostly confidential?
I'm usually quite quiet about my clients and what they're doing, just because I just I really respect the client confidentiality, and try to maintain confidences. So I tend not to speak very much about my clients, but I will say that I'm incredibly proud of my client portfolio, and I've worked with some wonderful businesses. I've worked, I think, 20, 30 projects at least, around founding teams from around the world. Um, and not all of them contact me because they want to set up in the UAE. But that is certainly one of the main reasons why people do contact me. And I'm always very grateful for the opportunity to be able to educate people about what things are really like on the ground, what are some of the things that you need to look out for, how to make smart strategic decisions, how to interpret the information that you receive. So those are all very important parts of developing a go-to-market strategy, and being set up for success. I think that for um, for clients that specifically are wanting to get licensed in the UAE, what I have observed is that the ones who are already operational in another market tend to have a greater sense of the mountain that they have to climb. It is
Understood.
it is no small feat. Any market that you attempt to launch in, but then even when you go to your second and third market, you've got to climb the mountain all again. And obviously, you learn from your initial journey of growing, getting your product in market. But if you have never gone to market, if your product hasn't launched, um, and you're looking at the UAE as your launch market, then I would be advising in a very different way to say, well, maybe instead of going straight to this high compliance licensing option, maybe we set you up in a technology incubator or an innovation lab,
Totally.
and help you discover your product market fit and your go to market strategy in a way that isn't going to cost as much or have as much supervisory burden for you on the compliance side, because it can be quite expensive if you go straight to licensing but you haven't actually validated your business plan.
Yeah.
So,
No, I
so
completely understand.
the strategy really depends on what the client is trying to optimize for, what their needs are, how much experience they have, whether the product is live. So the advice is different every time. It's super bespoke, and I think certainly a lot of people want a cookie cutter templated solution, but I'll also tell you the regulators can spot that from a mile away, and they don't like when they receive a copy paste application. They want to know that you really understand what you're signing up for and that you're going to make it. They also don't want to waste their resources working through an application if they don't think that you can succeed, because they have hundreds of other applicants in the pipeline that they could service. So, um, you know, being able to build the confidence of the regulator and knowing how to do that is a big part of how quickly you'll get licensed and what kind of relationship you'll have with your supervisor going forward. So those are a few, I guess, observations that I've had from having worked with companies at different stages of growth, and just having spoken to different people in the market about their experiences. I think, again, a lot of people who've never worked in a regulated entity, or never operated in a regulated environment, do have a tendency sometimes to underestimate what it means to be a supervised entity, and that it is quite a serious thing. So, um, yeah, it's really quite a mixed bag. Every founder has their own journey, but it's incredibly rewarding to be a part of the journey.
Yeah, it sounds like it. I mean, I've spent 2 years now since the idea of MezFi came about um, through building between software development, legal fees, speaking with license holders here in Australia, engaging with some, finding that we weren't a proper fit, to the point where now, we're really close to launching, which I'm very excited about. Um, if I hadn't gone through these 2 years worth of heartache and learnings and everything. Look, if I'd just been able to launch from day one, I don't know if I would have survived, to be honest with you, because I've seen that burden of the compliance. Certainly, I've worked before in a compliant business, but it's different as a founder, and I'm sure you know that better than anyone working with that many founders. It requires a different mindset to be a founder than just working in a business.
Completely different, absolutely. And I have so much respect for the founders that I've worked with. It, I think, takes um, a huge amount of conviction to back yourself, especially when you do inevitably run into challenges that founders do face. And um, when you get those crisis calls of something's gone wrong, yeah, it really, I think, brings you into reality that while crypto may sometimes seem like fun and games, there really is a lot at stake. And if
Oh
you
yeah.
want to build something that has an impact and makes a difference, and you're engaging with risk in a very uncertain environment, both from a markets and a legal perspective, then you're not going to embark on that if you don't have conviction in your mission. So certainly, yeah, as I said, I feel very privileged to be able to support people on that path.
Yeah, I mean, it is a privilege, I think. Look, not that I've ever advised for anyone, but is this the perfect job for Chloe White? Like, is there anything else? What would be your perfect job? You're 36 now. I think I'm right. Actually, I shouldn't say that. Sorry. It is published on the AFR, like I said. So, gosh, I shouldn't have done that. Sorry. Um, okay, so you're 26 now, um, and you've got lots of work to do in the future. Would you ever see yourself founding your own company, or is advisor world, is that just the perfection for you?
I pinch myself every day that this is how I'm spending my time. I absolutely could not imagine what else I could be doing. I don't I don't know where it goes from here, because every day I wake up and I think, well, I just want to keep doing exactly what I'm doing. So um yeah, I'm just incredibly great. Fell down the rabbit hole and decided to keep going through those tough times when people were trying to talk me out of it, and told me that I was making a huge mistake and throwing my career down the drain. Like I feel like I've been vindicated, that that the industry has been legitimized, and we have passed that critical mass, that turning point of uncertainty now, that although there's still a lot of questions to be answered, we can see the path that we're on now. And yeah, I don't know what else I could really say other than just that I pinch myself every day, and I would just say that um, it can be difficult sometimes to work on your passions, but if you can find a way to genuinely enjoy the way that you work, the people that you work with, the content of your work, then that's a really fantastic position to be in life, and I'm very happy to be in that position myself.
Yeah, I totally agree. One thing that I wonder for you, and I mean, you did say a bit about how you came into crypto and how you sort of found it, but for me, I'm 39. I've got three kids. For a long time, I was sort of plodding along with career, and I was in coffee for 10 years. I was an entrepreneur, but it didn't quite have a spark for me. And so the confluence for me was having done some, crypto investments, and then seen a few of the issues that happened in the crypto space, things that fell down. And then I saw this sort of confluence where I could go to myself, hey, this is something where I can be of service. This is something that I can see potentially going really well. And then that passion sort of was born out of that, so to speak. So I guess my question is, can you pinpoint the moment where you saw, hey, this is my future. This is what, I can see where this is going to go. This is I've got passion for this. Could you pinpoint that moment for me, or is it a bit like, just everything coming together slowly, or whatever?
Yeah, there was one night, I was back late at the office in the treasury, and I was in a boardroom, and I, you know that meme of the guy with like the diagram all over the whiteboard. Um, that
Yeah, I
was
know
like
it.
me. I had just written all over the wall and all over the table, and I had papers everywhere, and I was just like, what's the answer? How do we find a way that, we can support innovators in a way that also protects consumers? And I I just realized that it was one of the most interesting policy problems that I'd come across in my career, and just felt so energized when I was sort of looking at this web of possibility, and I thought, oh my gosh, like this is where I want to be. This is what I want to be working on. And I felt like such a um like a fire in my belly to just want to solve this problem. And yeah, it was a very I think real moment for me of this. These are the moments that I think you wait for in a policy career. So yeah, that night kind of alone in the with the texters stands out to me. I think that was in 2019. I think I had that moment. Yeah.
Nice, nice. I love that. That's wow. That almost gives me goosebumps to think about, because yeah, I mean, to find that passion, some people wait a lifetime to feel that way about, what
Mm,
they do. It's a privilege, I feel, to wake up
mm,
every day and be working on something that I just think is, and maybe I've got a bit of hubris about it, but for me, I just feel it's so important. It has so much potential to do good and be of service, to the world and people and yourself as well. At the end of the day, um, yeah, no, that's amazing. Look, we're almost out of time, and I promised you that we would finish with, the thing that I finish every video with, which is 3 tips. And I think there's um, lots of people around the world at the moment who have eyes on Dubai and would be really interested, to know, some pointers on, what are the steps, or what are the most important things for them to think about if they were to want to bring a business to Dubai. So, if we can finish with, Chloe White's 3 tips for anyone that's looking to get into the Dubai market as a Web3 business, and then we'll sign off from there.
The first tip that I would give to businesses is I would say make sure that you do your research properly. It is a very hyped market for good reasons. You'll come in and hear a lot of good news stories, and you'll be welcomed and very well received. You need to be able to dig beneath the marketing and the branding to understand also what are the challenges. Everything has a trade-off and a cost. So if you are looking at the situation thinking this all seems really easy and perfect and wonderful, then keep researching so that you really understand what is the right way for you to enter the market with your unique business needs. So dig deeper would be the first tip. I would say um, the second one would be also to make sure that you keep your standards high and raise your ambitions as well. If you're coming from a lower energy market, you may not even realize that you've kind of absorbed some of that um, I guess, slower vibe, and come into a place like the UAE, you realize that there's actually so much on offer. There's so much at the table. And so, um, raise your ambitions. Like, don't be afraid to dream big, because you know, you're playing in a completely different league now. And maintaining those higher standards is really important as well, because um, you know, I think one truth about the UAE is, at the end of the day, it's actually a small enough economy with long enough memories that you know, reputation and relationships are completely invaluable, and you just can't afford um, to play short-term games if you want to have long-term success. And that's you know, as true in the UAE as it would be anywhere else. And so I think that the sort of personal standards and level of integrity needs to be maintained along with your ambition. The final thing that I would say is, I have been contacted by individuals looking for career advice, how they can move to the UAE and find a job in crypto in Dubai. Um, in general, I would just say to anybody who's unhappy in their role, I would say the most important thing to have conviction in your career is to be yourself. If you're so unhappy in your role and you feel like you're bending over backwards to try and adapt, and it's not working, not every culture, not every environment is going to be the right one for you to thrive. You really should be able to be yourself, and to enjoy the work environment that you're in, or the work that you're doing. And so if you're in a toxic work environment, or you just feel like you're not succeeding in the role that you're in, then just leave. There's other jobs. And so, you know, I would congratulate the people who are considering to relocate. Especially, it's one thing to leave your job, but to also move countries is really exciting. And so I think that it's great to be, you know, reaching out to people, seeking advice. I do try to help as many people as I can. I can't get around to everybody, unfortunately, but I do try to help people. And I think, you know, just keep asking those questions and looking for those opportunities. Don't languish in a role where you're miserable and unhappy, because you're probably not going to succeed. And you're wasting time that you could be spending doing something, building and having an impact, and doing something that you find rewarding.
Oh, amazing. That is three tips that are definitely worth remembering. I'm going to have to write those down and keep them for myself as well. For when I come to Dubai, I'm going to keep the energy high, I promise. Uh,
Great to hear.
all right, Chloe, thank you so much. I really appreciate you carving out the time from your busy schedule to be with me for MezFi Meets. You know, it's been a pleasure. It's been informative, and you know, we've really gotten a really great view into, you know, your mindset about crypto, about the VARA regulations, about Dubai. And you know, just thank you so much, and keep doing what you're doing, because you're doing great. And you know, it's amazing. So I really I'm in awe, and a lot of people are. So just keep doing what you're doing.
Thank you so much for your kind words. I really appreciate the invitation, and for the really fun questions too. It was a great chat.
All right, thank you so much. Have a great day. Enjoy it, and we'll chat soon.
We'll see you soon.
Thanks for watching. If you want to find out more about MezFi, go to www.mezfi.com. Follow us on X, YouTube, LinkedIn, Instagram, and Facebook. You can see our shorts there, and look forward to the next conversation, and see you then.